when we talk about the narcissist, the first thing to understand is that what you see on the surface is almost never what you're actually dealing with. The narcissist lives behind a mask, and it's a convincing one. To the casual observer, they can appear magnetic, confident, full of charm. They walk into a room and seem to know how to capture attention, how to hold it, how to draw others into their orbit. And if you're not careful, you'll mistake that mask for the person. You'll think the confidence is real. You'll think the charm is genuine. You'll believe you're in the presence of strength. But here's the uncomfortable truth. It's a performance. Underneath the surface, the narcissist is usually fragile, insecure, and deeply unsure of their worth. They've learned, often from an early age, that the world doesn't love you for who you are, but for who you can pretend to be. And so, like an actor perfecting a role, they construct a false self, a polished exterior designed to cover the hollowness within. You can see this in how they operate. The narcissist feeds off admiration. They need your validation the way a drowning man needs air. If you give it, they thrive for a moment. If you withhold it, they panic, lash out, or discard you entirely. This is why relationships with narcissists feel so volatile. You're not relating to a grounded human being. You're relating to a mask that constantly needs propping up. Psychologically, it's not hard to trace the roots of this. Many narcissists grew up in environments where love was conditional. Maybe they were only praised when they performed well, when they achieved, when they looked impressive. Or maybe they were criticized so relentlessly that the only way to survive was to hide the vulnerable self and project an image of invulnerability. The tragedy is that the mask becomes permanent. Over time, they forget how to take it off. They start believing the mask themselves. And so they spend their lives trapped in an exhausting performance, convincing others and convincing themselves, yet never finding the authentic self. And what's the consequence of this for the people around them? Chaos. Because if you're in close proximity to a narcissist, you're not in a relationship with who they are. You are in a relationship with what they want you to see. That means the ground is always shifting. One moment, you're the most wonderful person they've ever met. The next, you're worthless in their eyes because you didn't give them what they craved. This cycle, idealization and devaluation, isn't a side effect of narcissism, it's the engine of it. Now here's where many people make a mistake. They assume the narcissist is simply arrogant, puffed up with self-importance, unwilling to care for others. But arrogance is only half the story. Beneath it lies something closer to terror, the fear of being exposed as inadequate, unlovable, empty. That fear is what drives the endless need for validation. It's what drives the manipulation, the gaslighting, the desperate attempts to control how you see them. They can't risk letting you glimpse the fragility beneath because even they can't bear to look at it. And if you've ever been caught in the orbit of a narcissist, you know the effect it has. You begin doubting yourself. You begin questioning your reality. You think, maybe I am too demanding, maybe I am too sensitive, maybe I am the problem. That's the power of the mask. It doesn't just hide them, it distorts you. It pulls you into their script until you forget you were supposed to be living your own. So what do you do with that knowledge? The first step is awareness. If you can see the mask, you're no longer at its mercy. You can stop confusing performance with authenticity. You can stop chasing the approval they dangle in front of you like bait. And perhaps most important, you can stop giving away your sense of worth to someone who never had the capacity to validate it in the first place. Because here's the key, the narcissist doesn't teach you who they are. They teach you who you are willing to be around them. They test your boundaries, your resilience, your ability to say no. They push you to see whether you'll accept the mask as reality or whether you'll demand something more authentic from them and from yourself. And in that sense, the narcissist, destructive as they can be, plays a strange role in your life. They force you to decide, will you live chained to someone else's illusion, Or will you claim the freedom of your own truth? So remember this, the mask of the narcissist is compelling, but it is not real. Don't confuse their performance for strength. Don't mistake their charm for love. Don't let their shifting perception of you dictate your perception of yourself. See the mask, understand the fear that drives it, and then step outside its grip. Because the moment you refuse to bow to the performance, the mask loses its power. And in that moment, you reclaim your own. If the narcissist hides behind a mask, the psychopath is something even more unsettling, because often they don't need one. They move through the world with a calmness that doesn't come from peace, but from emptiness. A kind of void behind the eyes, where the narcissist is desperate for admiration, frantic to be seen. The psychopath doesn't crave your approval. They crave control. They crave power, and that difference changes everything. When you deal with a psychopath, you're not dealing with someone who simply wants to be liked. You're dealing with someone who views human emotions, your kindness, your empathy, your guilt, not as shared experiences, but as weaknesses to exploit. To them, your compassion is leverage, your conscience is a tool, your trust is a doorway they can step through to take whatever they want. And that's what makes them so dangerous. They don't just break rules, they operate outside the very framework of morality most of us take for granted. You expect reciprocity, but they give you calculation. You expect remorse, but you get indifference. You expect humanity, but you encounter something cold, mechanical, and unyielding. People who've been close to psychopaths often describe the experience the same way, disorienting. You feel like you've been living in a reality that suddenly cracks open. You say to yourself, no one could possibly do this and feel nothing, but they can, and they do. And that disbelief, the sheer shock that another person could be so unaffected by the pain they cause, is part of their power. Because while you're struggling to process what's happening, they're already 3 moves ahead, playing a game you didn't even realize you were in. And let's not kid ourselves. Not every psychopath is a serial killer lurking in the dark. Many wear suits, sit in corner offices, or stand at podiums. They're found in politics, corporations, even in families. Environments that reward ruthlessness, boldness, and charm often elevate them. And because they can mimic normal human behavior when it serves them, they blend in frighteningly well. But here's the cost. Wherever they are, chaos follows. Not the loud, obvious chaos of shouting or fighting, but the quiet, corrosive chaos of trust being dismantled, of stability being undermined, of lives slowly unraveling under the weight of subtle manipulation. They leave behind confusion, self-doubt, broken confidence. It's not just that they harm you, it's that they make you question your very perception of reality. That's why the aftermath is so brutal. Victims of psychopathic manipulation don't just feel hurt. They feel hollowed out. Their sense of reality collapses. They begin to doubt their memory, their instincts, their very worth. That is the signature of psychopathy. It doesn't simply attack your circumstances, it dismantles your identity. It makes you question whether you even know who you are anymore. But here is where the shift must happen. The moment you grasp that not everyone you meet plays by the same moral code, the chains start to break. You stop projecting your own conscience onto people who don't have one. You stop mistaking coldness for strength, charm for sincerity, boldness for leadership, and in that clarity you reclaim your power. Because clarity is protection. Understand this, the psychopath's greatest weapon isn't violence, it isn't manipulation. It's your disbelief. They thrive in the gap between what you assume about human nature and what they actually are. The moment you close that gap, their advantage collapses. They lose their ability to play their game in the dark, because now you can see, and when you see, you are no longer a participant in their theater, you are an observer who can walk away before the damage is done. But let me make this unmistakably clear. Awareness is not the same as cynicism. Protecting yourself does not mean becoming cold. It does not mean extinguishing your empathy or turning bitter toward the world. That would be their victory. The true answer is to become anchored, to stand so firmly in your awareness, your boundaries, and your strength that no mask can deceive you, no manipulation can bind you. Yes, the psychopathic mind is predatory. Yes, it thrives on chaos, but you are not powerless in its presence. Knowledge dismantles manipulation, awareness erases advantage, and the moment you pierce through the illusion, their control shatters. And this is where the hidden meaning emerges. Encounters with such people are not only dangers, they are revelations. They wake you up to reality as it truly is. They strip away your naivety. They force you to sharpen your vision. And when your vision sharpens, when you see with unclouded eyes, you are no longer prey. So remember this, the psychopath survives only in the shadows of your assumptions. Shine the light of awareness, and the chaos they bring dissolves. Because in the end, the most dangerous thing about the psychopath isn't what they do. To you, it's what you allow yourself to remain blind to. And the moment you see, they lose everything. Why do such people appear in our lives? Why the narcissist? Why the psychopath? Why now? It's a haunting question, because when you've been through their fire, when you've walked out scorched and shaken, it doesn't feel random. It feels targeted, it feels personal, and maybe it is. See, life has a way of sending us the exact people who expose our blind spots. The narcissist appears where you confuse approval with love. The psychopath enters where your compassion has no guardrails. They arrive not by accident, but almost like a mirror held up to your unexamined patterns, your open wounds, your vulnerability. They force you to see what you've been unwilling to face. This doesn't make their actions right. Far from it. Evil is still evil. Manipulation is still manipulation. But if you're willing to step back from the pain and look deeper, you'll realize something unsettling yet liberating. These encounters are teachers. Brutal teachers, they don't whisper, they wound, but the lessons, if you can survive them, are life-changing. Think about it. Before the narcissist, maybe you thought love meant constant self-sacrifice. You thought being needed was the same as being valued. They shattered that illusion. Before the psychopath, maybe you assumed everyone had a conscience like yours. You gave trust easily. You assumed the best. They shattered that too. Painful? Yes. But without that confrontation, would you ever have seen the cracks in your own foundation? Or would you still be asleep, mistaking weakness for kindness, control for love, charm for truth? Sometimes life doesn't protect you from the predator. It introduces you to them so you can finally protect yourself. And this is the paradox. The very people who break you often leave you stronger than you've ever been. Not because of them, but because of what you discover in yourself after surviving them. You learn boundaries. You learn self-respect. You learn the strength of walking away. You learn that empathy without wisdom is a wound waiting to happen. And once you know that, you don't just recover, you evolve. The narcissist and the psychopath don't just appear in your life to destroy you. They appear to awaken you, to strip away your illusions, to demand that you stop living blind. They are not gifts in the sentimental sense. Don't mistake this. They are challenges. And challenges, if faced with courage, refine you. It is only after betrayal that you understand loyalty. It is only after manipulation that you understand truth. It is only after being devalued that you learn the necessity of valuing yourself. These experiences carve wisdom into your very being. They leave scars, yes, but scars are proof you lived and proof you overcame. And let me be blunt, if you don't learn the lesson, the pattern repeats. You'll meet them again in a different face, in a different form, until finally you wake up, because life doesn't let you skip the curriculum. It will keep presenting you with the same exam until you pass it. So why do these people appear in your life? Not because you deserve pain, not because you are weak. They appear because you are ready, whether you know it or not, to evolve past the version of yourself that allowed them in. They are the storm that forces you to build a stronger foundation. And when you finally see it, when you finally grasp that every encounter is either a chain or a key, you begin to take back authorship of your life. You stop asking, why me? And you start declaring, never again. And that shift, that fire, that awakening is what transforms you from victim into survivor, and from survivor into something far more powerful, awakened. So yes, these people are real, their damage is real, their cruelty is real, but so is your capacity to rise out of it stronger, sharper, more alive. They are not the end of your story. They are the chapter that forces you to start writing it differently. And if there's one truth I want you to leave with, it's this. Their presence in your life is not the verdict of your weakness. It's the beginning of your awakening.